Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're here again, sorting through stacks of sources so you don't have to. Now,
Mhm.
when you hear Thanksgiving, you probably think, late November, turkey, maybe the Macy's parade. It feels like this solid, purely American thing.
Yeah, but you look at the sources and it becomes clear pretty fast that it's not that simple, not fixed at all, and definitely not just American. So our mission today really is to give you a clear path through how this idea, just giving thanks for the harvest, for the year, turned into all these different national holidays and often very secular ones across the globe and
Right,
centuries.
we've got a pile of articles here covering the history, the culture, the global picture. One thing that jumps out is, okay, yeah, it has religious roots, deep ones, but it's also been a secular thing for a long time. And honestly, harvest festivals, they happen everywhere in the fall. This feeling is global, even if the dates are all over the place.
Exactly. And, to really get how the US and Canadian versions came about, we actually need to go back way before the colonies, back to England.
Okay, let's do that. I found this fascinating. The roots are actually in the English Protestant Reformation, Henry VIII's time. Sounds less like pilgrims and pies and more like uh, political calendar shuffling.
Oh, it absolutely was initially. The Reformation really shook up the religious calendar. Before 1536, the church had something like 95 holidays where you couldn't work. Reforms cut that down to 27. But then you had the Puritans, and they wanted to get rid of almost all of those, especially the fixed ones like Christmas and Easter. They felt those dates didn't have, a real spiritual connection anymore.
So it wasn't about not giving thanks, but changing how you called those special days. They wanted holidays that were like responses to specific events, things they saw as God acting directly.
That's precisely it. That's the core of the Puritan approach. They swapped the fixed calendar for these two kinds of special days of providence. You had days of fasting, called for bad stuff, plagues, droughts, floods, you name it. And then the flip side, days of Thanksgiving, called for specific blessings, things they saw as gifts from God.
So these Thanksgivings weren't automatically every year, they were reactive.
hmm
Do you know some of the first big ones they called?
Oh, yeah, they happened pretty quickly. There was a huge day of Thanksgiving after the English beat the Spanish Armada in 1588. Another one when Queen Anne was delivered in 1605. But maybe the most interesting one is the annual Day of Thanksgiving set up in 1606. That was after the gunpowder plot failed in 1605, the plan to blow up Parliament.
And the specific annual day, the one for the gunpowder plot failure, that eventually morphed into Guy Fawkes Day, November 5th. Wow. It's incredible how those early Puritan ideas fed into later totally secular holidays.
And if you trace that specific English tradition over to the New World, well, that's where the popular American story gets really tangled, both geographically and historically. Everyone defaults to Plymouth, but the real story is frankly a lot messier.
Right, because there's actual documented proof of an annual required Thanksgiving tradition in the colonies
Yeah.
before the Pilgrims' famous 1621 feast.
That's the Virginia claim, exactly. December 4th, 1619, 38 English settlers land at Berkeley Hundred in Virginia. And their charter, the document setting up the settlement, specifically ordered that the anniversary of their arrival be yearly and perpetually kept holy as a day of thanksgiving to Almighty God.
Eh,
That's planned, it's annual, it's documented 2 years before Plymouth.
And yet, Plymouth 1621 is the story everyone learns. The big multi-day harvest festival, Pilgrims, Wampanoag, that feast was triggered by a good harvest, right?
It was. But here's the kicker, historically speaking. The Wampanoag only showed up after hearing the colonists firing guns. Ceremonially, they had a treaty, a defense pact. And crucially, our sources show that whole 1621 event, it was basically forgotten for centuries. It was only labeled the first Thanksgiving much, much later in a footnote in a book published in 1841. It's kind of shocking, really.
Okay, so that makes it sound like what that historian James Baker called it, a tempest in a bean pot, a fight over definitions.
hmm
So, with these competing claims, what actually counts as the real Thanksgiving for historians? Is it about the religious service aspect or the holiday celebration part?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it gets even muddier when you throw in the really early claims. You've got Spanish explorers holding a religious service down in San Elizario, Texas, way back in 1598. And even earlier, historians point to the Spanish in St. Augustine, Florida. They had a Catholic Mass and then a communal meal on September 8th, 1565. That's 56 years before Plymouth.
Hmm. It feels like the Puritan idea, that specific concept of a special non-Sunday day of Thanksgiving for giving praise, that became the template. for the later political versions, no matter who technically did what first.
And maybe because it's all so tangled, geographically and chronologically, even the U.S. presidents have had to kind of tiptoe around it. President Kennedy, back in his 1963 proclamation, he actually mentioned both the Virginia and the Massachusetts claims, basically sidestepped picking a winner.
It's wild how fast politics and, well, money can mess with a historical tradition. Which brings us neatly into the 20th century U.S. and the time when Christmas shopping almost wrecked the Thanksgiving day completely.
Right, it wasn't always set in stone. George Washington declared the first nationwide one for November 26, 1789. Then, thanks largely to Sarah Josepha Hale, this incredibly persistent writer Lincoln made it a national holiday in 1863, fixing it to the final Thursday in November.
Okay, so that worked for a good long while. But then came 1939 and the whole Thanksgiving fiasco. That sounds like peak historical drama fueled by economics.
Totally. President Franklin Roosevelt tried to shift the date. He wanted to move it 1 week earlier to the next to last Thursday in November. The reason? Purely economic. The idea was that creating an extra week between Thanksgiving and Christmas would goose retail sales, help things during the Great Depression.
And it just caused immediate chaos, right?
Oh, total chaos. The country literally split. About half the states went with FDR's new date. The other half stuck with the traditional last Thursday. And then you had 3 states, Colorado, Mississippi, and Texas, that just gave up and observed both dates. People immediately started calling it Franksgiving, seeing it as, presidential meddling with the holiday.
So how did they fix that mess?
Took Congress 2 years. In 1941, they finally passed a resolution setting the official date as the 4th Thursday in November, starting in 1942. That gave some consistency, kept it roughly traditional, but avoided the last Thursday problem if November had 5 Thursdays.
Okay, so while the U.S. is sorting out its self-inflicted calendar crisis, Canada, our neighbors to the north, they had different reasons pushing them to fix their date, and they did it earlier.
That's right. Canada generally had earlier celebrations anyway, partly just because winter and the harvest season tend to arrive sooner up there. They'd had various dates linked to battles or royal events, but finally, in 1957, the Canadian Parliament settled it, the second Monday in October.
And choosing October wasn't just about harvesting earlier. Was there another reason?
No, you're right. It was also practical. It helped make sure Thanksgiving wouldn't bump up against Armistice Day, what we now call Remembrance Day, which sometimes happened when Thanksgiving was floating around early November. So it was also about managing their national calendar effectively.
Okay, let's pull back now and look at the bigger global picture, because these sources show Thanksgiving means really different things around the world.
Yeah.
It's not just, a harvest festival that moved by a few weeks.
Yeah, the variety is what's really striking. Look at Germany. They have Erntedankfest.
Which, lovely name, literally means Harvest Festival of Thanks.
Exactly. And it's usually celebrated on the first Sunday in October. It's very much a Christian harvest festival focused on the local church or parish. You see churches decorated with all the autumn crops, fruits, grains. They often have processions. It feels much more rooted in that religious harvest tradition compared to the North American versions, which have become pretty secular.
But then you flip to somewhere like Liberia, founded by former American slaves and free people of color, so there's a direct historical link to the U.S.
Liberia celebrates on the first Thursday of November, but how they celebrate is quite different. It's often more about church services, maybe just relaxing. There isn't one specific food or a big feast that's like the national tradition. And actually, because it was brought over by the American settlers who established the country, some Liberians today see it as a bit of an imposition, something from the past that doesn't really connect with their own culture.
Interesting. Then we've got places that basically just adopted the American date, maybe for cultural ties or diplomatic reasons, like Brazil.
Yeah, Brazil's Dia de Ação de Graças, Day of Action of Thanks, is the 4th Thursday of November, same as the U.S. It only started in 1949. Apparently, the Brazilian ambassador to the U.S. saw the big American celebrations and thought it was a great idea to bring back home. These days, it's mostly celebrated by families with American roots and some Protestant groups.
And there's that nice historical connection in the Netherlands, too, isn't there?
That's a lovely one. There's a special non-denominational church service held every year on the American Thanksgiving Day. It's at the Pieterskirk Church in Leiden, and it specifically commemorates the time the Pilgrims spent there, the hospitality they received before sailing to America. Separately, some Orthodox Protestant churches in the Netherlands have their own Dankdag, a Thanksgiving Day, on the first Wednesday in November, but that's not a public holiday.
And one more, a real geographical outlier. Norfolk Island, Way out there, technically part of Australia.
Right. They celebrate on the last Wednesday of November, which is fascinating because that date actually echoes the old U.S. tradition. Before FDR and Congress fixed it to the fourth Thursday, apparently American whaling ships brought the tradition there back in the mid-1800s.
It's pretty clear that in a lot of places the holiday name stuck, but the link to harvest is totally gone. Some Thanksgivings are really about politics or labor now.
That's where you see the name itself get completely repurposed. If a country calls a day Thanksgiving, what are they actually giving thanks for in the modern context?
Take Grenada, down in the Caribbean. Their Thanksgiving is October 25th. It has absolutely nothing to do with harvests. It marks the anniversary of the U.S.-led invasion in 1983. It's a day of thanks for, essentially, political intervention and stability, not crops.
Or look at Japan. They have Labor Thanksgiving Day, Kinrik Kansha no Hai, on November 23rd. Now, okay, it has ancient roots in a Shinto harvest ceremony called Niamesai, but the modern national holiday. Its legal definition is about commemorating labor and production. It's giving thanks for the workers and what they produce.
And then back in the U.S., the holiday has just become this huge cultural anchor point for the whole year, hasn't it? Forget just the family dinner. You've got the massive parades, Macy's, Philly, the big NFL games, and of course, the starting gun for the holiday shopping season, Black Friday.
And you even see social shifts, like how Friendsgiving popped up in the last decade or so. You know, having a separate Thanksgiving meal just with friends. It's like formalizing gratitude for your chosen family, a very modern, very secular spin on that old idea of giving thanks for special blessings.
So yeah, we've gone from English Reformation politics through debated colonial claims, navigated the weirdness of Thanksgiving economics, and ended up looking at modern political anniversaries. This holiday name has really soaked up just about every cultural and economic impulse of the countries that observe it.
I think the big takeaway here, looking across all these sources, is that no matter the date, no matter the specific reason why it started, there's this persistent human need to set aside time, to formalize gratitude. Whether it's for a good harvest, for peace, for freedom, even for economic stability, it's a fundamental impulse that gets wrapped up in a national day.
Which brings us to a final thought for you, something to chew on after this deep dive. We briefly touched on the Philippines. As an American colony, they observe Thanksgiving. Even after independence, they kept it up, usually on the U.S. date, until about 1969.
But then, things changed dramatically. President Ferdinand Marcos issued a proclamation in 1973. He moved Thanksgiving Day to September 21st. And the crucial part, he explicitly repurposed it to celebrate the anniversary of his declaration of martial law the year before. He basically hijacked a holiday about gratitude to legitimize his authoritarian move.
That version of Thanksgiving didn't last, thankfully. It was discontinued after Marcos was overthrown in 1986. But that piece of history leaves us with a really potent question about what national holidays mean, doesn't it? When a government can just change the date of a holiday and completely twist its meaning from thanks for bounty to celebrating martial law, what significance is actually left for the people who are supposed to be celebrating it?